Regularly, I see people confusing privileges as though they were rights. I see rather frequently chance of housing, medical attention, and schooling as being rights. But none of these are rights. From my bias to state for this video, I will be speaking from the position of libertarian/classical liberal thought. I believe that rights are inherent in mankind, and while I am a Christian, the position that I will be stating does not require a belief in a deity to hold. Whatever is my right as a man is also the right of another, and it becomes my duty to guarantee as well as to possess. Thomas Paine in The Rights of Man. So, what are rights? Rights are immutable characteristics of the human experience working exclusively in the negative. Negative, in this sense, doesn't mean bad. What it means is that it deals with the self and not the other, as opposed to the positive, which is that which deals with the other rather than the self. Negative and positive actions, likewise, are those actions acted upon the self or the other, respectively. To give examples, the right to speak what you will and wear whatever you want to wear is a negative. The action of detaining a person for the ownership of a plant is a positive action. Let's begin with the most basic of rights, and that is the right to the self, also called the right to life or the right to self-govern. Your life is your own. It is no one else's on this earth save if you freely give it to another. But even then, another cannot truly own your life. You simply allow them to do what they wish, perhaps only to a certain degree. But this is the most fundamental of rights. And it is from this right to the self that all other rights extend from, for if you do not own yourself, then nothing that comes after is of your own making or ability. So it is from the right to the self that will be a basis for all rights spoken of, and without it, no rights would be that are. This right also means that you are responsible for your life and actions. These things are on none but you. My philosophy is based on the principle of self-ownership. You own your life. To deny this is to imply that another person has a higher claim on your life than you do. No other person, or group of persons, owns your life, nor do you own the lives of others. Ken Schooland in The Adventures of Jonathan Gullible. From the right to the self. This necessarily means you have a right to what you do in your life. This could be from what you put into it to how and when you wish to end it. But for this argument I am presenting, the right that comes from the right to the self that I will focus on now is the right to your own labor. If you own your life, then you must, by necessity of that right, have a right to your work. Some will say that under capitalism, you do not have a right to your labor, your boss does. But this is a silly argument. If you own your own labor, you possess the right to give up that labor in exchange for what you see as more valuable than your labor, and just as you have given it, you may take it away and give it to another or use it for just yourself. To deny one the ability to give up their labor in exchange would be to say they do not own their labor at all, and if they do not own their labor, they do not own their life, as you have resigned their fate as being controlled by another rather than the self. Labor is discovered to be the grand conqueror, enriching and building up nations more surely than the proudest battles. William Mallory Channing in War. Now, if you own your life, if you own your labor, then you own the right to the product of your labor. This product of your labor is your property by virtue of it being an extension of your labor, which, as we already have seen, is an extension of your life. The product of your labor can be anything. It could be a homemade guitar made of scrap wood, or it could be the plumbing system of a house. Owning your property necessarily entails that you must be allowed to give it up at your own discretion and for whatever you find to be the acceptable price. There are implications surrounding this in that yes, housing, medical care, and schooling are not rights. It is the value of the improvements only, and not the earth itself, that is individual property. Thomas Paine in Agrarian Justice. This is where we get down to the crux of my argument. To deny the right of property, you must first deny their ownership of their labor, and to deny ownership of their labor, you must deny ownership of their life. If you agree that these are all rights, then you must agree they can do with their rights what they will as long as they do not use their rights to take away another person's rights. Being allowed to do this means they can also deny people the use of the product of their labor, and they can deny the privilege of gaining their labor. And this is where we finally get to it. You do not have a right to other people's products or labor, no exceptions. To say you have a right to a social media platform is to say you have a right to the product of a person or person's labor, and thus their labor in their life. The same is to be said of medical care, housing, and education. You do not have a right to force someone to treat you. You do not have a right to forcefully take property. You do not have a right to someone's knowledge. You do, however, have a right to seek these things out in a way that does not deny the rights of others. It most certainly is good to give up property and labor for the benefit of those less fortunate, but to force others to give them up as well as to deny their right to the self. It is to deny their humanity and ownership of their life. I would be the first to agree that a doctor should treat anyone, regardless of status. But his ownership of his labor must necessarily mean he can deny his service, even if to do so he must leave his job to deny service or the person needing treatment dies. One's right to the self must be maintained, even at the cost of life or denial of service. As long as what you do pertains to the self and does not take away the rights of another, this includes slavery, murder, and robbery, you have the right to it. The government at times preserves your rights but also denies them and restricts them, and I will not advocate for them to do such more for any man. Thanks for watching. Send cute navel.